stage 4, it's actually our finishing stage. And it's the stage that you want to be able to spend the most time going back over all of the different features that are noted on page 105 in your workbook. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to now carve in our CEJ. We save that to the very last because we want to make sure that we have all of our dimensions correct. So what we first need to do is we need to take our Bowley gauge and set it at the correct cervical incisal crown length, which is going to be 10.5. So I've got 10.5. I lock that in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place this from the incisal edge up against the tooth here. Hold that in place, and then I'm going to take my Hollenbeck carver and I'm just going to draw a line across the facial surface here. I'm also going to do the same thing on the lingual. Place it bottom of the Bowley gauge on the incisal edge, lay it up against the top of the tooth here. And then I'm going to make my little mark at the top of the Bowley gauge, which is the cervical incisal crown length. Okay. Clear the wax away. Kind of make it a little bit more distinct if you'd like. We don't need to gouge the root. Okay. The next thing we need to do is we need to mark the curve. On the mesial surface here, the curve of the CEJ is 3.5, so I'm going to set my Bowley gauge at 3.5, lock it into place, and I'm going to measure from the two marks that I have on either side on the lingual and labial. I'm going to place the top inside of the Bowley gauge right where that line is. And then I'm going to take my Hollenbeck carver and I'm going to mark a little notch at the bottom of where the curve is going to be. Right about here. Now what I need to do is I need to connect this line from the lingual down to this line here, and on the facial down to this curve here. So I should follow a line down and a line down. Now the thing about the CEJ is the CEJ is where the enamel overlaps where the root is. So we always want to make sure that the root is going to be carved out just a little bit here. You want to make sure you keep your dimensions, but you want to see the enamel or the CEJ line overlap onto the root. So we don't want there to be an indentation on the enamel. We want the indentation to be on the root here. And again, I'm going to follow my line from the facial and against the root down to the curve of my CEJ. So it'll kind of slope a little bit. And then the same thing for the lingual. Carving down to the CEJ. I may also need to take some strokes up the root to kind of blend that all in. guys should see is my CEJ line here on the facial, and rolling it down, comes down to this 3.5 mark here, and then comes back up on the lingual. Then I'm going to switch over to the distal side, which curve on the distal is going to be 2.5, so I'm going to readjust, set my Bowley gauge at 2.5 here, set it in place, and again, on the distal, I'm going to place the upper portion of this Bowley gauge on the line between the CEJ on the facial and the CEJ on the distal here. And then I'm going to grab my Hollenbeck carver, and I'm going to score it just a little bit right on that distal side. And now I'm going to connect my dot from the lingual down to the distal curve, and the same thing from the facial down to my distal curve. And what I may want to do is just roll so that the root, when I carve on this root, should create a nice little demarcation. Once you've got that outlined, you want to really make sure that you have a really prominent CEJ that you can see all the way around. Once we've got the CEJ in, I'll brush all the wax away from it. One of the next things that we're going to do is we're going to work on creating the fossa here on the lingual surface. So you're going to use the round end of your discoid, and I've got my discoid out here, and I'm going to come right underneath the cingulum here, in this area. And we want a wide, shallow fossa. So I'm going to not go from the peak of the cingulum, but down underneath the cingulum here. And I'm going to draw kind of in a little bit of a triangle, flaring out, keeping in mind that I need to leave this marginal ridge here intact, which would be the distal marginal ridge. I need to leave the mesial marginal ridge intact and also the incisal edge intact. So when I am pulling and creating a wide fossa, but I'm not rolling over that incisal edge. You don't want it too deep, so you want to check periodically to make sure that you've got your cingulum still there, and you've got your fossa. You want to emphasize your ridges by kind of tilting your discoid to the side a little bit, create a little bit more of a prominent shape. And the same thing along this incisal edge here. fossa to be pretty smooth. You don't want to have a whole lot of lines in that fossa there. Now, because we've created a distally offset cingulum, we don't necessarily need to have that cleft like we drew in the drawings there. As long as we have our distally offset cingulum over here, you can see this would come up a little bit higher on this mesial side and be a little bit lower on the distal side here. And you can flare out my distal marginal ridge just a little bit more. Okay, so I've got my wide, shallow fossa. I've got somewhat of a curve to my incisal edge here, although this needs to be thinned out a little bit more. That's a really thick incisal edge. So one of the things that I can do is I can bring this fossa down a little bit further. Still need that incisal edge, but I can take a little bit more away from the center. And then I can also thin it out a little bit on the facial surface here. Keep in mind that I want to roll it so that way it still keeps this round shape. It doesn't flatten it out. So I'm thinning out my incisal edge a little bit. Okay. Now, some of the other features that are on the crown here is we want to be able to put in our mamelons and our developmental grooves. So first we're going to start with our mamelons. What we want to do is divide the tooth up into thirds here, and only at the incisal edge we're going to create a little bit of a divot, 1/3 of the way across, and then come over, and another little divot, another 1/3 of the way across. And you'll see this a little bit better when I show this across the white background here. We don't need really, really huge mamelons, but just enough. So when I turn it sideways, you should be able to see the mamelons that I've created. Now remember, this is the incisal edge dimension. We talked about the developmental grooves that needed to come up from those 3 lobes that fuse together to form the crown. So from this incisal edge here, where I've created this first little mamelon, I'm also going to create a little bit of a developmental depression here. And that'll correspond with that one mamelon, and I'm going to come over to this edge of this other mamelon here. And again, I'm going to create just a little bit of a depression, not a groove, but a little bit of a depression here. Kind of match these up a little bit. So I have my mamelons here on the edge, and then I also have my developmental grooves that correspond with those mamelons there. One of the other things that we need to do is we have little imbrication lines which are right on the cervical third, just in front of the CEJ on the labial surface. So I'm going to gently carve in 3 little lines, kind of like a little just like 3 little half moons right up here at the margin. they don't need to be really overly distinct. Just enough so that I can see them when I'm going to grade. Okay. So I've got my imbrication lines, I've got my mamelons, I've got my developmental depressions that correspond with my mamelons. I want to double check and make sure I've got my right angle on my mesial, and I've got more of a curved angle on the distal. Now one of the things I can do is I can actually take off a little bit of this incisal edge here to make that distal a little bit more round and pronounced. I just want to double check that on my lingual, that I have my mesial marginal ridge, got my distal marginal ridge, and I've also got my incisal edge pretty distinctly here, and that my fossa shows that I have a distally offset cingulum here. Okay. So one of the things you're going to want to do before grading is you're going to want to go back over and check all of your dimensions. Your mesial distal diameter at the CEJ, your labial lingual diameter at the CEJ, want your